The video begins with footage recorded by a man named Elias, who worked the night shift delivering medical supplies between small towns scattered across the desert highways of Nevada. According to him, driving those roads after midnight always felt strange. Not dangerous exactly, just empty in a way that never felt natural. There were stretches of highway where you could drive for 20 minutes without seeing another car. No lights, no gas stations. Nothing except miles of black desert stretching endlessly beneath the moonlight. Elias says the first strange thing happened sometime after 2 a.m. He was driving toward a tiny town outside of Tonopah when he noticed headlights far behind him in the distance. At first he didn't think much of it. Another late-night driver. But after several miles, something began to bother him. The car behind him never seemed to get closer, no matter how fast Elias drove. The headlights stayed the exact same distance away, not gaining, not falling behind, just following. He remembers, laughing nervously to himself while recording the road on his phone. Tell me that's not weird. The highway ahead remained completely empty while those distant headlights floated behind him like 2 white eyes in the darkness. Then suddenly, the lights disappeared, not slowly fading, not turning off, gone instantly. Elias checked his mirrors repeatedly. Nothing behind him, only darkness. He tried convincing himself. The other driver must have taken an exit he somehow missed, but there were no exits for miles. The silence inside the truck began to feel heavy after that. Even the sound of the tires against the pavement seemed quieter somehow. Then the radio started. Crackling. At first it sounded like ordinary static. Then buried inside the static came a voice. Weak. Distorted. Almost impossible to hear. Pull over. Elias froze. He adjusted the volume. The voice repeated itself. Pull over. His stomach dropped. The radio station cut out completely for a second before suddenly returning to normal music like nothing had happened. Elias laughed nervously again, though this time it sounded forced. Nope, absolutely not. He kept driving. A few minutes later, he noticed something standing beside the road ahead. At first, he thought it was a road sign, but as his headlights reached it, he realized it was a person. Tall. Completely motionless. Standing directly beside the highway. The figure wore what looked like old hospital scrubs hanging loosely from its body, its head tilted downward unnaturally. Elias slowed, instinctively. Then he noticed something worse. The figure had no face, not hidden in shadow, not obscured. Just smooth, pale skin where the face should have been. Elias swore loudly and sped past it. As he looked in the side mirror, the figure remained standing, perfectly still, watching the truck disappear into the darkness, except it had no eyes to watch with. A few miles later, Elias finally saw lights ahead, a small gas station sitting alone beside the highway. Relieved, he pulled in immediately. The place looked ancient. Only one gas pump still worked. The fluorescent lights above the building flickered constantly, buzzing loudly in the empty desert air. Inside, an elderly cashier looked up at Elias the moment he entered. Before Elias could say anything, the man asked a strange question. You saw someone on the road tonight, didn't you? Elias felt his blood turn cold. He slowly nodded. The cashier stared at him for several seconds before speaking again. You shouldn't stop if you see them. See who? The old man hesitated. People call them the Hollow Ones. Elias laughed nervously. The what? The cashier leaned closer. They stand near the highway, pretending to need help. But they're not people anymore. Elias immediately assumed the man was joking, but the cashier's expression never changed. Years ago, the old man continued, there was an accident out here. A transport bus carrying psychiatric patients crashed during a dust storm. Some died immediately. Others wandered into the desert. The lights overhead flickered again. They were never all found. Elias shook his head. So what? You're saying ghosts are standing on the highway? The old man glanced toward the dark windows outside. No, he whispered, not ghosts. That answer disturbed Elias more than anything else. He quickly paid for a drink and returned to his truck dot before he closed the door. The cashier called out one last warning. If you hear knocking on the truck tonight, don't look outside. Elias drove away, trying to laugh off the entire encounter. But deep down, something felt wrong now. The highway ahead seemed darker than before. The desert looked endless dot, like the world outside the headlights simply didn't exist. For almost an hour, nothing happened. Then came the knocking, three slow taps against the side of the truck, knock, knock. Elias nearly jumped out of his seat. He looked toward the passenger side window, instinctively, but remembered the cashier's warning. His breathing became shallow. Another knock sounded, this time directly behind him. Knock. Something was outside the truck. Keeping pace with him, Elias gripped the steering wheel tighter and forced himself to stare straight ahead. Then came a new sound, breathing. Heavy breathing. Right outside the driver's side window, Elias could hear it clearly over the engine. Wet, slow, inhuman. He finally made the mistake of looking. For one horrifying second, he saw a pale face pressed against the glass, except it wasn't fully human. The skin looked stretched too tightly over the skull. The eyes were completely black, and the mouth hung open impossibly wide, exposing rows of tiny jagged teeth packed together like needles. The thing smiled at him, then vanished instantly. Elias screamed and nearly swerved off the road. The truck fishtailed violently before stabilizing again. When he checked the mirror, the road behind him was empty, but the knocking continued. Now coming from inside the truck. Knock. From beneath the back seats. Elias pulled onto the shoulder immediately and grabbed a flashlight. His hand shook violently as he searched the cabin. Nothing. No one there. The knocking stopped. For several seconds, only silence remained. Then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against his better judgment, Elias answered. At first, there was only static. Then came a voice. You looked at us. The call disconnected. At that exact moment, every light inside the truck shut off. The engine died. The desert became completely silent. No wind. No insects. Nothing. Then shapes began appearing around the truck. At first, Elias thought they were rocks or bush, but slowly they moved closer. Tall figures emerging from the darkness, one by one. 5. 10. More. All standing silently around the truck, all wearing those same torn hospital clothes, and none of them had faces. Their smooth, blank heads reflected faintly in the moonlight. Elias locked the doors, even though he knew it probably wouldn't matter. The figures slowly surrounded the vehicle. Then, all at once, they tilted their heads toward him simultaneously. Like they were listening, a child's voice suddenly came through the radio. "Let us inside." Elias began crying. The truck wouldn't start. Outside, the hollow ones started tapping their fingers against the windows, softly at first, then faster, more aggressively. Tap, 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 tap. Dozens of pale hands, smearing against the glass. One of the creatures suddenly slammed its head violently against the windshield. A sick crack echoed through the truck. Its blank face split open slightly from the impact. And beneath the torn skin, Elias swore he saw another face underneath. Moving. Trying to emerge. The tapping became deafening. The windows began cracking. Elias desperately turned the key again. Nothing. Outside, one of the creatures pointed toward the back seat. Elias slowly turned around. Something was sitting inside the truck with him now. A woman, still soaking wet with blood, her face entirely smooth and featureless, except for a mouth stretched open unnaturally wide. "You shouldn't have looked," she whispered. The engine suddenly roared back to life. Elias screamed and slammed the accelerator. The truck launched forward violently, knocking several figures aside as he sped back onto the highway. In the mirrors, the creatures remained standing in the road, watching him disappear into the desert. But the woman in the back seat was gone, or at least he thought she was. Hours later, Elias finally reached the hospital where he was delivering supplies. Shaking uncontrollably, he told security everything that had happened. Nobody believed him. Exhausted, Elias eventually returned home just before sunrise. According to him, things only became worse after that night. At first, it was little things. Soft knocking sounds inside the walls after midnight, footsteps moving through empty rooms, whispers barely audible from dark corners. Then he began waking up to strange marks appearing on his body, long pale fingerprints around his wrists and neck. As if something had been touching him while he slept. One night, he woke suddenly because his bedroom door creaked open slowly on its own. Standing in the hallway was one of the faceless figures, perfectly motionless, watching him. Elias grabbed his phone flashlight instantly. The hallway was empty, but muddy footprints remained on the floor, leading directly toward his bedroom. He stopped sleeping after that. Friends noticed he became paranoid. Exhausted. Terrified of being alone. After dark. Then came the final video. The footage was uploaded to his account 3 weeks later. No caption. No explanation. Just darkness inside his apartment. The camera slowly moves through the living room while Elias breathes heavily behind it. Whispering can be heard throughout the apartment. Dozens of voices, overlapping softly. At first impossible to understand, then clearer. Join us. The camera turns toward the hallway. Several faceless figures stand motionless at the far end. More than before. At least 20 crowded together, unnaturally tightly. Elias backs away, trembling. One of the figures suddenly points toward him. Then all of them begin walking forward simultaneously. Not running, not rushing, just slow, synchronized steps. The whispers grow louder. Join us. The video cuts violently before the figures reach him. Elias was reported missing the following morning. Police found his apartment completely empty. No signs of struggle. No evidence he ever left. But investigators did find something disturbing. Dozens of muddy footprints covering the floor. All leading into Elias's bedroom. and none leading back out. To this day, truck drivers traveling those Nevada highways still report strange encounters late at night. Some describe faceless people standing beside the road asking for help. Others hear knocking against their vehicles despite nobody being there. And a few claim they have received radio transmissions from voices whispering the exact same warning. You looked at us? But perhaps the creepiest stories come from drivers who swear they sometimes see headlights following them through the desert, always staying the exact same distance behind, never getting closer, never falling back, and if the lights suddenly disappear, locals say there is only one thing you should never do. Never stop driving, because out there in the empty desert, something may already be following you home.